episode 183, Exploring Diversity with Phyllis Johnson. Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of Keys to the Shop, where we give you insights, inspiration, and the tools you need to grow as a coffee service professional. My name is Chris DeFirio. I'm your host for the show, and really happy to have you along today. Now, if you have not yet subscribed to the show, I would encourage you, hit the subscribe button wherever you get your podcasts. That way, when new episodes come out, you will be alerted to that and always stay up to date. Also, if you can rate and review this show on iTunes, that would be fantastic as well. Thank you so much to those of you who have done that already. It means a lot to hear how the show has impacted your lives and your businesses. It really is motivating for sure. So thank you so much. Now, today we have a really fantastic episode talking with Phyllis Johnson, our special guest here, talking about diversity, inclusion, and your shop. Now, this may be a challenging subject, but I think, and I hope that this episode is encouraging to you and equipping you to make the first steps toward having a diverse staff, or to have a mindset to work toward diversity in your shop. And Phyllis just has a ton of fantastic insights in this episode, so I'm excited to share this with you. Now, today's episode is brought to you by the folks who are going all over the world to curate the best equipment for you in your shop or your home bar. And of course, this is Prima Coffee. Prima Coffee is based in Louisville, Kentucky. I've known them since the beginning of their company, and since I've known them, I have really just been impressed by the passion, the rigor, and the expertise that they wield when they are putting together the offerings that they have on prima-coffee.com. They are truly one of the world's best specialty coffee equipment suppliers. And if you're looking to outfit your store with the best equipment, if you're looking to scale your store to a second or third location and you need to upgrade your equipment, Prima Coffee is the place I feel you should go. First step is, of course, visiting the website over at prima-coffee.com. When you get there, you're going to find that not only is this a great website with amazing offerings, but also they have a really great library of videos and blogs, materials to help you use the equipment well and understand the brewing process better. They really are all about helping you make great coffee every time. So I encourage you, go to prima-coffee.com for your coffee equipment needs. Tell them that you heard about them here at Keys to the Shop, and thank you so much, Prima, for your support of this show. Now, this episode is also brought to you by the Pacific Barista Series. That is the groundbreaking, world-renowned plant-based performance beverage line that is developed to meet the standards for excellence that professional baristas have for what they serve their customers. And when I say it's developed for them, it's also developed with them in their feedback, and it's why they do so well on the bar. You could be using the coconut, rice, almond, soy, or oat milk, and you will find that it can stand the heat from steaming. It can also produce unmatched silky texture, great for latte art, and it will keep the flavor balance of your beverage focused on coffee, so it's not going to be just an overwhelming flavor of whatever beverage you're choosing to use. So that is a huge win, and these are great people who support the barista community and the coffee community globally. These products are just a testimony to that fact. Of course, I think you should get these in your store. Try them out for yourself. See how it works with your coffee. I think you're going to be impressed, and I think more importantly that your customers are going to be impressed. So go visit pacificfoods.com or click the link in the show notes for more information. And a huge thank you to Pacific, not only for supporting the show, but for making these great products. I truly enjoy using them myself, and I hope you find joy in using them as well. All right, so today we're going to be talking about diversity and inclusion in your shop. Of course, this is a subject that needs to be talked about because we do have a tendency in coffee to develop communities that can be exclusive. And it's in an interesting predicament because as people who are into hospitality, it is part of the charter, I think, in coffee shops that we should be welcoming to all people. but not a lot of thought is put into how, like the mechanism for the welcoming itself. We do put a lot of effort into dialing in our coffees and roasting our coffees, etc. But when it comes to subjects like this and dialing in the experience of our shop so that it is not only welcoming to all, but also is able to reflect our communities where the shops are located, it tends to be overlooked or avoided. And I'm really happy to be able to talk about this subject with somebody who is so accomplished in coffee and in tackling the subject of diversity and inclusion. Our guest today is Phyllis Johnson. Phyllis is the co-founder and president of BD Imports, an award-winning social enterprise focused on responsible sourcing of specialty coffees. The coffee is the recipient of numerous awards, including Responsible Business of the Year and Diverse Supplier of the Year. A pioneer of the Women in Coffee Empowerment movement, Phyllis led the conversation at the United Nations to secure initial funding and work to support women in coffee initiatives. She has consulted for the United Nations International Trade Center, leading the formation of the International Women's Coffee Alliance chapters in East Africa. She has had the pleasure of sharing her perspective and the value of working with women entrepreneurs at the World Trade Organizations and United Nations. Her work has also been the subject of case studies taught at Oxford University and Harvard Business School. Phyllis holds a Bachelor of Science in Microbiology from the University of Arkansas, Fayetteville, and a Master's in Public Administration from the Harvey Kennedy School. She is the recipient of numerous awards, including the Harvard Kennedy School Barbara Jordan Award for Women's Leadership. Her work was recognized by a 2019 Maggie Award for the Roast Magazine article, Strong Black Coffee: Why Aren't African Americans More Prominent in the Coffee Industry? Phyllis is a thought leader who has served on numerous boards, including the Specialty Coffee Association, International Women's Coffee Alliance, Coffee Quality Institute, and the National Coffee Association. In this conversation with Phyllis today, we are going to be talking about how she came to be in the coffee industry, her perspectives that she developed on the coffee industry since being in it for the last 20 years, and her perspectives on diversity and next steps and actions that we can take to make diversity a reality. And of course, for most of us here in the Keys to the Shop audience, this means in our shops. So I would encourage you, as you listen to this, to take a posture of self-examination, to take a posture of learning and growth. And I hope as you've been in the Keys to the Shop audience for a while, that that's already a part of who you are. In that this show is based on the idea that we always want to be growing and we want to be challenging ourselves. And I hope that some of the ideas here challenge you and also equip you to tackle this subject where you can with what you've been given. So with all that said, let's get right to it. Here now is my conversation on diversity and inclusion with Phyllis Johnson. Well, hello, Phyllis. I'm so honored to have you on the show today. How are you?
I'm fine, Chris. Just fine. How are you?
I'm doing pretty well, actually. Fall is here in Louisville, Kentucky, which means I don't have to hate life every day. The humidity and heat. So I'm doing just great. It's an honor to talk to you, as I said, and you're constantly busy, it seems, and you've done so much work in the coffee world, and in especially recently, I've just re-listened to your interview at the SCA with Kebe Kante of Red Bay Coffee, and I've always wanted to have you on the show, and here we are. I'm really excited. I wanted to start a little bit by exploring your background and how you got into this incredible career you've had in coffee. How did that all start for you, getting into the coffee industry, and what did you experience once you stepped into it and really experienced it?
Wow. Well, I've been in coffee for 20 years. And first of all, I want to say thank you for the invitation. I think you sent me a note, and I was going back through some old social media messages, and I saw it, and I wanted to reconnect and have an opportunity to sit down and have a conversation with you. So I thank you for that. And also, I just want to say that as I look back at your podcast in the past, how impressed I am with the diversity of voices that you've brought to your audience. I think that is so important. And I've had a chance to check some of them out. So I just want to thank you for that effort that you've made. Well, I started in coffee 20 years ago. I went to the University of Arkansas and studied microbiology and never thought that I would end up in coffee. But it really is the fact that I grew up on a farm in Arkansas, a cotton farm, and had this strong affinity to farming that I did not realize. I really wanted to get away from it. Sometimes I think we don't realize what our inner selves are calling us to do, but our minds tend to want to be something different. So when I started in coffee, I was very unsure of myself, and I felt that it was kind of an industry that was really hard to figure out how to operate, especially at the level in which I wanted to begin, which would be at the import level. So there wasn't a lot of information, and I still think there's probably not a lot of information out there. But being a scientist, having a background like that, growing up on a farm, I wasn't afraid to just kind of dig in and see what I could find. And that has been, the most interesting and, rewarding thing about coffee is that it kind of sets you on a journey, a self-discovery sort of journey. And that's what coffee has been for me.
So you, in a sense, reconnected with your roots a little bit by getting into coffee.
Exactly. I felt that was exactly what happened for me. And I think that happens for a lot of people. Coffee is kind of a medium that carries a lot. It's a transformative sort of product. Yeah, there's a scientific term that I'm not thinking about right now, but yeah, it's there.
Mm-hmm. And so right from the get-go, you wanted to be involved in the agronomy side. Of course, it makes a lot of sense. And you started BD Imports shortly after, or was that the very first thing you did when you got into coffee?
Well, I wanted to be involved at the people part. I had a successful career as a microbiologist, and I understood, what it was like to have a career and to do wonderful things in a career, sales, marketing, science, all of that. But for me, when I decided to come to coffee, it was during a time when I was totally unfulfilled with just, working for a company that was focused on the bottom line. And of course, you have to be focused on the bottom line to run a successful business. But I felt that there's got to be a way to connect with the human part of me. There's got to be a way to use what I have, my skills, my education, to help move people forward, not just me in a material quest, so to speak. And so that's when I started searching for something, and I wasn't sure what it was. And it happened to turn into coffee. I was fascinated, being African American. I was fascinated with African art. And wherever I would travel in my scientific sales career, I would stop by different shops and see, what they carried. And I always loved the stories, more so than the product themselves. It would be like, well, tell me about this. Who made this? How, I would stop at, there was a guy in Minneapolis who owned a Kenyan shop. And so he would spend all this time just telling me stories about the different carvings and pieces and what they meant. And so I fell in love with storytelling. And if I think about what I've been able to do in coffee, a lot of it has to do with sharing stories, listening to stories, because I think that that's a large part of it. It's sharing one human experience with another.
A lot of that has increased in recent years. I mean, you've been operating BD Imports for 20 years now, and it seems that in that time, that story aspect has just increased, where it was faceless, and a lot of it still is in the producing world of coffee. But the stories of who is behind what we drink is even more available than ever. Was it something that you saw as a lack at that time, or was it something that you've also seen increase over time since you've been in the world of coffee?
Oh yeah, we kind of knew it was coming. Sometimes you just have these intuitions as a person, as a business owner, just a desire to see something different and to see the world changing a bit. And that's how it was for me. When I came to coffee, I first started out working, and I think for the first 7 years of the company, we focused on importing coffee from Kenya. And what I noticed when I would visit coffee roasting companies, they loved Kenyan coffee, but they had no real knowledge about the product other than the flavor profile. They kind of maybe sort of knew a region, but that was about it. And again, I think it was the researcher in me that, and the love for stories, that allowed me to go and sit with my exporter and basically be a student. Tell me about the auction sheet. How, what does this series of numbers mean? Where is this region located? What is this flavor profile? Tell me about these people. Tell me about, the farmers, and, to just really dig deep. And I think that had a lot to do with our success initially. Being able to bring a full story, because there's really power in education. There's power in giving people an understanding of something that they may not understand. There's value in that. It's what I guess I'm trying to say. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of value there. And, sometimes we think that you just want what you want, but it's added value when you know something about it. And, we just felt that time was only going to become more and more ripe for the next generation and future generations to know more, to see more, to be more present with the products that they use.
That's a great way to put it. To be present with a product it's like being present with a person. If you're listening to them truly, you're not thinking about other things. You're not taking them for granted. You're there doing past guest Oscar Trimbley talks about deep listening, and that's something that almost could define where we are in coffee now, where we're adding a level of responsibility to ourselves. If we call ourselves professionals in the industry, it's more than just the daily punch list that we have in front of us that helps us keep our jobs. It's a larger scope of responsibility to know, to act on things that we find out, even if that feels awkward to do. Yeah. So when you started really just getting your stride in the business and getting to know the coffee industry really well, over the course of time, you noticed something that kind of fueled your work in the coffee industry that a lot of people know you for now, which is to be a promoter of inclusivity and diversity in the stream of value in coffee. And we want to talk about that a little bit in regards to retail, but I'm interested in knowing, when in your career in coffee did you notice that this is something that needed to be addressed, and that's something that you wanted to make a part of what you did in the coffee industry?
Well, it started from day one. I mean, to answer that question, right out.
Right.
But also, it's always been a part of my life. So to have that perspective in coffee was not something that I needed to have, a long list of experiences before I came to that realization. Um, it has it has always kind of been there, being one of two African American Black women to graduate from the University of Arkansas at Fayetteville with a degree in microbiology in 1987.
Mm.
It was there, but it wasn't it it wasn't at the forefront of my mind, and it wasn't at a point to where I could put words to it or put a clear understanding to it. Being the only Black woman the only Black person working at a professional level in a company in a city where there was 15 to 20% African American, those questions, they've been there. They've been there for most of my life. So coming to coffee 20 years ago, it was definitely those questions were there. But I can say that the connections with coffee, it was a little bit trickier to pull it all together. And what I mean by that is, you look around and you say, okay, where's the diversity in this industry? And it is there, but it's definitely separated and compartmentalized based on the work and based on the position. Why am I seeing so few people of color in decision-making roles, in more powerful leadership roles within the industry? So it takes a while. For me, it took a while in coffee to draw all the dots, because in coffee, it's more than my small city of Rockford, Illinois, where I had my first job. It's more than my University of Arkansas Fayetteville campus where I graduated from college. It really is the global marketplace. Mm-hmm. It is looking at it from the highest level, right? You can bring it down to a community level. Of course, you can say, here's my shop in the city with, we have no diverse staff or whatever, but we need to diversify. But for me, being an importer, I really had to step back and look at it. I had to look at it on a much, much bigger scale.
So when you take a look at that, when you took a look at it for the first time, until now, what do you think is behind that lack of representation in coffee leadership? Is it just, it's the way it's been and nobody has questioned it in a similar way to how you've wanted to, question things and, know about the coffee farmers behind the coffee? In the similar way, is it just that we're not asking questions about what we see and we're just kind of letting it run itself? Or what is the answer that you've kind of come to? Not that there is one in particular, but what is your impression of that?
Yeah. Well, I want to start by saying that, here's the problem with talking about diversity. If you're not considered diverse yourself, you may view the discussion as being anti-you. You may be very uncomfortable when the discussion comes up. And then when the discussion steps back a little bit deeper to try to probe into the reasons for the lack of diversity, and that, let's be honest, could stem from racism, oppression, or, just, obliviousness. Mm-hmm. That causes even more angst. So, and no one really wants to feel bad. No one wakes up every day and says, I just want this to be a horrible day. I want to be faced with problems that I have no earthly idea how I'm going to solve. We all want to get up and we want to have a great day and we want to be able to manage the challenges that we face. So I get that. I don't talk about the need for diversity to make people uncomfortable, or to make myself uncomfortable for that matter, because at times it can be very uncomfortable, even for myself. But what I've found is that, coffee professionals are more comfortable talking about tackling the C market, something that has been in place for a long time that we seem to have very little control over, versus tackling implicit bias. And, it's, as a person who is diverse, and I talk about the need of diversity, you may believe that, well, you're talking about it for your own, based on your own personal interest. That's not necessarily true. I talk about it because I've been incredibly blessed to have relationships with people from very diverse backgrounds. And sometimes I believe that when you don't have that, it's almost like there's this inability to understand and to see the value in it. And sometimes I do believe that the people who may not have the opportunity to have diversity in their relationships, in their business practices, whatever, wherever you may experience diversity, I think that they may know that, and they may feel that there's something that they're missing, but not sure how to get it. But I see it as the biggest contribution, one of the biggest contributions to my life, to have people from different backgrounds. I couldn't be who I am. As I think about my children, the biggest gift I could ever have given them was the ability to operate in different environments. I've traveled a lot to coffee producing countries, and I've traveled with a lot of Americans, white Americans predominantly, right? And I find that sometimes we're in a vehicle together and they want to talk about what's going on at their coffee roasting plant in New York or wherever it is. And I think, why are we talking among ourselves? There's some things here that I would never know about, if I didn't feel comfortable stepping beyond the things that I already know. Like, why is that lady wearing her scarf in that way? What does that mean? And there have been situations, I'll admit, I remember a trip when I went to Ethiopia, and being a woman of color is kind of interesting. I noticed this on a few trips when I've traveled with other groups or for some reason they'll all jump in the car together, and there's like not another seat is left. So there's like one out person. That out person is me. And then I'll have to get in the car with the locals. And that happened to me in Rwanda. It happened to me in Ethiopia and other places too. It's kind of funny. And I don't know if they think maybe Phyllis is more comfortable being around them. She's, I don't know, but it just always happened. Maybe they feel like they're closer friends with each other. But I'm always the odd woman out, odd person out. You cannot imagine what value I've received by being that odd person out. Riding through the countrysides with the local Rwandese or the Ethiopians. They tell me stories. They show me things. Oh my God, it's just, it's truly amazing when you just get that opportunity to open your mind to someone else's way of living, unjudgmental. It helps you to understand your own life better. So yeah, I read a lot. I read a lot of books. I read books about slavery in America, slavery in Brazil. I feel as um, someone who's involved in an industry, that it is my responsibility to understand it. I was sharing with a friend not long ago that I was talking to some coffee professionals, some very well established coffee professionals. And this one person said, I just really can't understand how people can grow this beautiful, beautiful coffee and never drink it. And I'm thinking, colonization. I mean, I'm just like throwing something out there. Maybe, when their country was colonized, they were forced to drink tea or encouraged to drink tea. So I don't think you can be a part of something, truly a part of it, without understanding what's behind it. And oftentimes I think that as those of us who live in the Northern Hemisphere, we tend to go out without knowledge, and we expect, we don't look to become even more educated, only in the ways that we want to be educated, only in the ways that are comfortable for us. And I think it's important that we dig deeper.
Yeah.
I'm not sure I answered your question on that.
Oh, 100% agree. And, it seems a few things that, I'm thinking of as you're unraveling this and talking about being uncomfortable and kind of digging deep to find what is behind the thing that we are involved in. There is in coffee, I think, and maybe this is just a life thing, my life is coffee. So, maybe everyone deals with this, but it's like, we want that formula. And once you get it, you want to stick to that, and anything that is, a little turbulence or a bump in the road is seen as a bad thing. And there's a plethora of books out there talking about sort of disrupting your own mindsets and things like that. But it, as ubiquitous as that message is, I think now it's also very much true. And it sounds like something that is underneath why some of this stuff is happening, that we aren't as curious about ourselves in our industry as we seem to be about extraction ratios or, other things that we are urgently seeking answers to because we're opening a coffee shop. But once we get those answers, it's like, well, I'm out of school now. I don't have to learn anything else. And I'm just going to wind it up and let it run. So disrupting momentum, yeah, I guess it is pretty uncomfortable. And I've certainly seen, as this topic has been brought up, a lot of folks who have been, I think, offended that it's been brought up. Or that it's been somehow construed as leveled against them personally. But I don't think that's how the idea, for example, of implicit bias works, especially not if, you're curious about your background. You would probably just say, yeah, of course, there's lots of different biases we all have.
Yeah, I mean, you have to get comfortable with being uncomfortable, because that's when you're going to learn. And I remember sitting in a class when I went back to graduate school, and the professor was saying things that made me uncomfortable. It was an economics class, and I remember physically having to move. I could not sit still, because when someone shakes your beliefs, you don't know how to put it back together and try to fix it and go forth with it, right? You really want to hold steady to what you believe. If you believe that we can't hire diversity, or we are who we are because we've hired the best people, it's easy to settle into ideas that cause you not to grow. It's when you say, okay, so this doesn't have to be this way, and I'm going to figure out another way. That's when you're going to grow, and that's when you're going to receive reward and benefits that you can't even imagine. And oftentimes, I think that we don't see engaging with people who aren't like us or diversity as being a revenue driver. But it is. I'll tell you the article that I wrote for Roast Magazine, and I give them a lot of credit. Strong Black coffee, why aren't African Americans more prominent in the coffee industry? The article brought forth potential individuals for the magazine to engage closer with. It won an award, recognized outside of the industry, but just talking about it brought forth benefits to the people who were featured in the article. It was just something that just kept giving. And I think diversity does that. But as long as you think that it has nothing to offer, it will have nothing to offer. But once you realize that it does, it truly, truly does. And on so many different levels. That's what I found.
It's for you. I mean, for you as in the company would benefit for sure, especially considering that, if your goal is to be a community gathering spot, which everybody's, cover letter for their business plan has some variation of community in it. But how meaningful is it really? Because, what kind of demographics are you designing your space around, and how hospitable are you truly to your neighborhood as a whole? I feel like sometimes we are fatalistic in the way that we view a business, and that our hands are tied and we can't do any. You said it earlier. It's we hire the best people. That's something people say a lot, and we can't do anything about it. We just put the application out there, and whoever comes, and then kind of wash our hands of it. But that seems pretty problematic when a lot more attention is paid to other areas, that are riddled with minutia. But then the area of hiring and even hiring diversely is treated like it's a big, broad brush that doesn't need any kind of detailed focus.
Yeah, like it's not going to fall prey to the same. You're not going to fall in the same system that that the whole society suffers from. It's like, I'm going to create my practices to operate my company as if there's no interconnection between society at large and what I'm doing, right?
Yeah.
They're interconnected. And the only way you get out from under that overall societal way of operating is to do something different. And we can figure out, like you said, we can figure out how to do that within maybe the product offering, right? You can say, hey, I'm from Kentucky. I'm going to offer a bourbon cold brew like they do at Coffee Imperium that I like. You might figure out how to do all these cool things within your cafe that connect with the public and be very creative. Retailers are very creative in their product offerings and how they serve the customer and, everything to that effect. But then when you get to how you are going to hire and place the most valuable part of your business in front of customers, you just kind of pretty much leave that to the overall, what society has dealt for us. And I think you have to dig deeper than that. And that requires work. Often, I think we are asked, as someone who is diverse, we are asked, how do I become more diverse? How can I create the diversity that you're talking about? I think it's self-discovery. I think coffee people are smart people. They work hard. They're passionate people. And I think that if you start to try to figure things out in a way that makes sense for you and your business, you'll find that there are a lot of blind spots that you may have, um, that you can uncover and find opportunities to bring in different types of talent.
That seems very important because not only does it make sense business-wise, because if you see a representation of your demographic in a public place like a coffee bar, for example, which is the unofficial gathering spot for the community, it's just the way it is. It's sort of an inherited responsibility that every owner has to not just make money and squeeze every dime out of the business, but it's also, there's like a public trust that comes with it in some way. Of being a third place, and it seems like you would erode that trust by just being, for example, in Kentucky, or in Louisville, just hiring white male seminary students, which is just kind of the way things can tend to go if you're not casting a wider net or even just taking a critical look at your personal momentum. That's not like some, speaking as like a white man myself who obviously has, see tons of bias towards all sorts of stuff in life, that you get into a mindset where you just think everything is fine. I don't have any ill intentions. And therefore, if a problem is brought up to me, it can be, like you said, it can be uncomfortable, but it's also a fearful topic. So somebody could explore bourbon flavored cold brew just fine because, nothing's going to, challenge them in that. But it seems like it's a fear of that discomfort or even having to change yourself that would keep us from exploring this topic even more. Do you find that to be true, that fear is kind of at the root of that?
It is. It truly is at the root. That is the whole purpose. It's fear, but I have to say that a couple things. Research shows that young, diverse individuals are driving the growth that we see in coffee. So that's, if you're opening up a shop or you have a shop, it's not going to be 65-year-old white men, maybe a few in the morning times, but your growth is really going to come from young, diverse individuals that are finding coffee and finding the different ways to consume coffee, be it, cold brew or espresso-based drinks. That's where the growth is, according to National Coffee Data Trends, research that the National Coffee Association puts out every year. That's what we're seeing. The U.S. is becoming a more diverse society, whether we like it or not. That is the case. So this, getting back to this thing with fear, and I'm going to speak from my own personal experience. I think that people are afraid of being displaced. No matter who you are, whether you're a white man or a Black woman, when you start to talk about diversity, what it means is you're trying to get rid of me because you want someone else in this spot. And I don't want to go anywhere. I like where I am. There's room for all of us. And as I look back on my own life, I've left some things that I've enjoyed doing so that someone else could do it better. And you know what? I got a chance to do something that was even more well suited for me. That has always been the case. It is. And I think that that's how we have to see it. It's not giving up this spot for someone else, or I'm going to miss out, or you think I shouldn't be here. There's a place for everyone. There's a place for all of us to be fulfilled and to do the things we enjoy doing. But I think we have to let go of that fear. when I was a consultant with the UN working on women's empowerment issues in East Africa, I absolutely loved doing that work. It allowed me to do it from a development perspective, what I had been trying to do for many years with my business, and that is support women, buy women coffee from women who, worked hard, know their stories. And then I got a chance to work with the UN and the International Women's Coffee Alliance and develop a network of chapters throughout East Africa. But after a few years, I knew that I needed to move on to something else. I knew that maybe someone else could bring some better ideas, some fresher ideas to it. And I've never been without interesting work when I've allowed someone else to take my place and carry the ball forward. Because ultimately, I mean, we all move on at some point and someone else will be carrying the ball. But I think that there's this unfounded fear and that there isn't a place for me or you want me out. I think you got to let go of that, because once you open up, you're a white man, right? Mm-hmm. You seem to embrace this whole idea of diversity from what I've been able to see and notice from your work. There's a place for you. Sure, you haven't worked your way out of, no one has kicked you to the side and you're no longer relevant. And so I think that there's this missed opportunity in a lot of ways, because it's not taking away from, it's adding to, which, if you are one that just believes in scarcity and there's only so much that can go around, and, you just live in fear that someone's going to take something away from you, I can see that. But if you believe that there's plenty and there's plenty to share, and we will all grow from each other. And maybe these are just way too basic principles, but I found them to work quite well in my own life. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've given up things that I've wanted to keep, and I've looked back and been happy that I gave them up and supported those who came behind me, and the doors have opened for other things for me to do and to be more impactful. So I think that sometimes maybe if you have fear in diversity, maybe you are really holding yourself back from some opportunities that are awaiting you.
Yeah. I mean, it would also make sense that you also are sort of living from fear in other areas of your life, and that it's a problem that would, once it's addressed, would solve a lot of different things. It could be the same is true, I think, for coffee shops. When I'm doing consulting for coffee shops, and we talk about how soon should you as an owner become not the main barista, when you give that responsibility over, and it's different for everybody depending on their situation, but it's never like 3 years. It's usually before that. But there's an emotional attachment to it because it's their baby. It's whatever. It's their livelihood, and they've done a lot of work for it. But once they get over that hump and open up opportunity, as you're saying, to others, then their business can start to grow, and they see it's not an invalidating thing for them. Like, I don't have to validate my worth by working the bar all the time. I can discover new ways of doing that and open up opportunity. And it seems like coffee shops are a great way to invite diversity into the coffee industry because of that scaling aspect of retail. But that fear also prevents that from happening, because a lot of times, at least from what I've seen, we can tend to hire our friends and family or friends of friends, and they all tend to look and think and act similar. And so it just kind of perpetuates the issue. So it definitely, I love what you're saying about that. It's basic, yeah, but It's like
Yeah.
forever a thing we need to get, a hold of, I guess.
Yeah, if you're in an environment and everyone is the same, you got to question what's going on here. Now, I'm a member of an investment club, and we are predominantly Black middle-aged women, and we decided we wanted to create an investment club for women. So, I don't question that so much. I know exactly what it is. But if I'm operating in the mainstream of society, and we are all the same, there's a problem because we're not all the same. We're not meant to be all the same. And we need the diverse in opinion at the table, because if that isn't at the table, as smart and clever as we might believe that we are, with decades of experience, there are some blind spots that will come back to haunt us.
One of the things that I think is lurking under the surface here is sort of maybe a frustrated reaction that could be stewing in somebody to say, okay, fine, I'll do that. And get it over with. I'll get the diversity shot, and hire diversely. But it seems to be bordering on, if not outright, tokenization. To kind of have that attitude. Would that be a correct assessment of it? And I mean, how do you go forward with that without having venturing into that area of, now I'm just going to hire diversely just because of the way people look, and you're just kind of perpetuating a problem in that way?
It's kind of like, it reminds me of when I was first starting out in coffee, and I would go try to sell coffee to different roasters, and they would be like, no, that's not what I'm looking for. And then I go back, months later, and they said, is it fair trade? And I'm like, yeah, we got some fair trade. And I'm like, wow, they're just really interested in the label. That's really interesting, right? So, yeah, and I get it. You do have customers that are interested in just fair trade coffee, and there's nothing wrong with that. But it's kind of like you have to have a genuineness to what you're doing. Otherwise, you will harm the people that you are trying to work with, and you will harm yourself. And it will come across as being authentic. If you feel that you have a lot of work to do, to even see the need, if you don't see the need, then you probably need to step back and examine yourself. Examine your thoughts, examine your circles, just, examine your own life. But I think that if you have the desire to create diversity because you feel that it will add something to your life, these are the people that I'm talking to. It's not those who are trying to say, I'm going to create a facade, as if we are diverse, but, I really don't believe in it, because that actually happens a lot. I've been in situations where I'm the only woman of color, only Black woman. And to be honest, I don't really care if they invited me because of what it looks like, because I know that I'm going to bring it. I'm going to probably tell you some stuff you don't want to hear. Yeah, I'm going to be 10 times better than you when I show up. Nice. That's just how I feel about it. I have read the materials. I have studied. I have gone the extra mile. So if you invite me as your pawn, as your, window dressing, be prepared. That's all I got to say. Be prepared, because I'm not going to sit quietly, and I'm not going to just be, oh, I know that I'm here because I bring value. I'm going to be there because I'm going to tell you what's in my head. I'm going to tell you what's in my heart. And I hope that we can all benefit from it. So you may start out as kind of thinking, I think you have to have respect for people. If you want them at your table, if you want them in your shop, you have to have respect for them and what they bring to the table and willing to listen to them and create the type of environment so that they can share their own perspective and their own opinions about things, because that's when you're going to grow. Whenever someone has challenged me, I always look to that person because I can grow. Everyone's going to tell you you're great. Oh, you're doing such a great job. Oh my gosh, but it's that person that's saying, but wait a minute, what about this? That person is going to take you to the next level. And that's really where I want to be. And I think that that's how we all should think when we think about winning and getting and growing and being of value to our customers or ourselves or improving our own lives. Find those who can give you real feedback, to challenge you in the way you think, not push them away because you don't want to be challenged, but for you to really re-examine yourself.
And you're giving them a lot of opportunity too. We were talking before recording about how it's just the opportunity that you as the employer get, but it's also the opportunity that those who you hire are getting to experience this world of coffee that they might not have otherwise been able to experience.
Right. What's always been so strange for me, you ask, when did I notice there was an opportunity to bring this diversity discussion to coffee? Well, first of all, just know there's it's kind of goes back a long way, a need to bring the discussion of inclusion and diversity to any industry at any time that we know about. But I oftentimes think that it's easier for a person, typically a white person living in the Northern Hemisphere, to decide to join the coffee industry without knowledge or history of the industry and make more money leading initiatives that are meant to support the advancement of Black and brown people who are born and have worked for generations destined in coffee fields in poverty. So I ask you, what is your responsibility in this? And I say this because I am that rare non-white person who is in the same position as you.
Right.
So I don't say this as someone who's bashing white people, I hate white people sort of thing. I am you. I'm sitting in a Northern Hemisphere. I have privilege. I see it and I say it. And I think that we have to become comfortable saying it, because when we wrap up this whole idea that, well, I'm just smart. Well, I live in a society where there are more opportunities. When we start piling on our explanations as to why this is, even if we've gotten to a level in which we can actually question this, right? I think that then we start to interject the answers. But for me, it's the most frustrating part is that we don't ever even question this. We operate in this environment and we don't question that, because in my head, I used to say to myself, well, Phyllis, why do you have this beef with, Black and brown people picking coffee and white people trading coffee? They don't grow coffee in Europe and Kansas, so white people can't pick coffee. I've actually put these things in my head too, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you really have to break it down to a level to where it makes sense to you. So it's my fault that I wasn't born in Ethiopia and white people don't pick coffee in Ethiopia. How can that possibly be? we can't change the dynamics of the world and how things played out before us. But I think that we have to look at it closer, and we have to understand that there are systems at play that where some people are oppressed and held down and don't have the same opportunities, and others are not. And if we choose to participate, what is our role in it? Do we continue along a mine of complacency and as if we don't even see it or notice it or have any power to do anything about it? Or do we even think about it? I don't know if that makes sense to you.
It's a great question. And it's, of the cares of the day that somebody in a position of power is dealing with. It's, they probably, I don't want to think about it. I don't have time to think about it. Besides, what can I do to fix it? And I think that's kind of the issue, if I'm hearing this correctly, which is it's not about fixing it necessarily. It's more about fixing you or fixing what you can with what you've been given, at least. It seems like a system that is oppressing people or keeping people in a place where they're perpetually in debt, etc., is built off of a whole lot of individual people and their values kind of coming together to form this, giant transformer of an issue. And so it seems like maybe the answer is, I don't know, but you do what you can with what you have. And is the first step, it seems like it has to be just to question yourself and see what you can do with what you have been given in way of privilege or resources, and just live consistently that way.
Yes. We all have power. Frank Sinatra, very well-known singer from many years past. Frank Sinatra was not known as some big civil rights leader, right? No. Frank Sinatra was known to sing popular hits like New York, New York. And I mean, just, had so much charm, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I was reading something a few months ago where Frank Sinatra had Sammy Davis Jr. travel and perform with him from time to time. And there were places where they would go to check into the hotel and they would say, well, he can't stay here. And Frank Sinatra would say, well, me and my band can't stay here either. And they would change their policy. So I think that, if you Google Frank Sinatra, the last thing you would probably come up was his right for equality, his stand for equality. But I think we all have power, and we can all speak up, and we can all speak out, and we can all do those little things every day that will start to make the world better and bring better opportunities, better awareness, more hope to the world that we live in. Someone said to me, someone very powerful in coffee said to me, Phyllis, I'm really embarrassed at how far we've not come with being more diverse in coffee. I've been in coffee for many years. And I remember thinking to myself, I'm so glad I'm not you, because at the end of the road, I don't want to be able to say that I'm embarrassed, because that embarrassment is because I've done little. If I've actually tried to do something, I'm not embarrassed. But when you haven't done your part, sometimes you feel a sense of embarrassment. So, I think I want to be able to say that I'm not embarrassed at how far we've come. I'm thankful for as far as we've come, because I've been a part of the fight. I haven't sat in a room filled with people who are just like me, look like me, and said it was okay.
Right. And I wondered then, as we have this in our head that, maybe I need to question myself. Maybe that's the first step. I need to sort of interrupt this pattern and examine it. Just be curious. What else, can we do after listening to this episode, and we can do tomorrow even? This audience is largely retail-based people. They have, a lot of them are in positions of power. They're going to be owners, or they are owners, or maybe they're a trainer or a manager. What kinds of things can they do, tactically speaking, or just, to not be embarrassed for their lack of action? What kind of actions can be taken so that we're not just perpetually talking about it or pontificating about it?
Yeah, well, first of all, I would hope that anyone who has come to me and said, I'm struggling with this, I have questions, I want to be more knowledgeable, I'm very understanding, because I think I shared with you that I took the implicit bias test and it showed that I preferred Europeans. Go figure, right? Okay. I did an event called Dining in the Dark, and I asked my group, where you're blindfolded and you have dinner with a group of people, learned a lot about myself. When people aren't looking at you, your everything changes, your whole posture, everything. And when people can't see you. And I asked my table with Dining in the Dark if we could just play this little game and say what we thought just based on voice, what each other's race was. And so the table said they thought I was a very young white woman. And it made me realize that maybe I've changed myself in a way, or why do I come across that way? So I think that you have to realize that you're not wrong, that we have lived in an environment that has not been inclusive, no matter how you look at it. Things don't just shake out the way they do. I think I used this analogy at another talk, where if you dropped a colorful group of marbles on the floor, all the blue ones wouldn't congregate in one spot, the yellow ones and the green, they wouldn't go to their and stay there, right? Some of the yellow would be over with the green, but we see this in our own lives and we act as if it's normal. We should be just as horrified by dropping a bowl of marbles, colorful marbles, and they all separate based on color with no electronic or nothing interplaying there. You should be horrified that happens.
I'd be running out of the room.
Right. So, but I think that we've been in an environment that this helped to perpetuate that this is okay. It is okay for all the men to be the doctors and all the women to be the nurses. It is okay for all the pilots to be men and all the women be flight attendants. It is the way that it is because, but I think this society is disrupting these whole ideas and I think you have to embrace you are where you are, not because you're a bad person or you're racist, right? But because you haven't been forced to do anything different, to think anything different. So you have to take it upon yourself to take the opportunity to seek a different pathway. So I think first of all, you have to take yourself out of this role of being a bad person, a negative person, a person who, doesn't want to be involved in this new way of inclusive thinking. What about me? And to say that, it's kind of like you're blaming yourself for breathing air, but air is all you have to breathe, right? So it's been a part of our society forever, for such a long time. And we see the problem, and the problems can be overwhelming, and we want to fix them right away. But it's not up to us to totally fix it. It's up to us to do our part in the sphere in which we can operate, and be it ever so small, or we have to do what we can do. But it first starts with opening your mind to seeing things differently. Um, I'm I'm not so keen to start to try to give specific examples to people on what they should be doing, because I think it is a journey, and I think it's a personal journey. Um, Diverse individuals should not, no, we don't hold the answers, is what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm.
I had the pleasure to meet with a young man when I was in Montreal last weekend. And he came to me because he said, I read your piece, I've read some conversation, some interviews you've had. And he said, I think the same as you. And I'm a white man, but I don't know. This is really hard for me because I'm in conversations that are probably thought to be safe, but I actually think differently. And I don't know how I'm going to basically carry my message. And I explained to him that as a Black woman, people expect me to be angry, which I'm not. They expect me to speak out on these issues. There's nothing to see here. It's this same old, but not with you. And you actually have a chance to do more than I could ever do. You have a chance to be in the room, be the voice that I could never be. So I think it's very important that if this is something that you care about, that you see value in, that you believe that there is something there for you in your organization, that you find your own voice in it, because there's a lot for you to gain.
Phyllis, this has really been a fantastic conversation. Again, so thrilled to have been able to talk to you about this, and it's hopefully a conversation that everyone continues in their own shops and within themselves as well. And you've given us a ton of stuff to think about and chew on. And thank you for challenging us in that way. Where can we kind of stay in touch with you, or your company, and where you're going to be maybe talking next? Where can we find out more information?
Oh gosh, well, BD Imports is my company. I'm on Instagram. You can follow me there. You can follow me a little bit on Twitter. I mean, I'm old. It's hard for me to keep up with all the social media stuff. I'm actually kind of glad my speaking engagements have slowed down a little bit. I've had a very busy year, so I'm thinking about writing a book. So to tell some of my story.
Will that be on BD Imports website?
Yeah. Hopefully, at some point, it's going to be a project that takes me a while. It's been 20 years, and there's a lot of great stories, I think, and a lot of great revelations that I've had throughout the years. But yeah, I actually write a lot of short stories on Instagram. So yeah, feel free to follow me there. And believe it or not, I've never worked in retail for coffee. No one's ever trusted me that much. But I did work in retail in my younger years, and a little bit also in my older years, but just as a case study almost, to understand the psychology of people who in the public and working in the public eye. So hats off. I love retailers. We could not do what we do in the industry without the farmers and the retailers. You're on the front line of interfacing with customers. Your value is incredible. Your stories, who you are, and how you represent the coffee is where it all comes together. So I'm so grateful for retailers.
Oh, thank you so much. We're thankful for you. And again, thank you for coming on the show.
Thanks, Chris. Take care.
Well, I hope that this has been a great opportunity for us to examine what we can do, or what more we can do with what we've been given within the spheres of influence that we have and specifically with the shop. Something that was talked about was the idea that we have these coffee bars, we have these businesses, and in some form there's a public trust to that. And I'm a firm believer in having representation in the coffee shop, especially when it is around the idea of your community and your neighborhood. If your coffee shop is not a reflection of your neighborhood, then you really have to start questioning what's going on there. And questioning yourself, as Phyllis brought up, exploring and challenging yourself and examining yourself. This isn't a subject that's just for this particular topic that we addressed today. This is something that goes to all areas of life. I think it's just a healthy practice, and it's something that we need to do in this area as well. So where do we go from here? I think kind of where we ended up at the end of this is that you have to examine yourself and see what your desires are. Really dig deep and find, do you have a genuine desire for this in your store and maybe in your own life? Start from there. Develop a genuine interest in this, and then take some steps to examine the processes of hiring, examine the processes of your build out, and say, how are you being a good community member? It's not just about hiring diversely, it's also about being able to welcome diversely. And there are some practical ways to be able to do that. Just like you would dial in a coffee according to its a region where it came from and try to figure it out and examine it. This is just what we're doing. It's so easy to kind of draw this correlation. If we do it with coffee, we can do it with our communities. We should. And I love that we had the opportunity to be encouraged and challenged by Phyllis to that end. And I hope that in some way that this episode has made a difference in how you might make decisions in the future. I know that I'm going to be thinking a lot about this episode and what I can do and continue to do to be a part of the solution and disrupt my own thinking and stay on the path of growing and examining myself. So a big thank you, Phyllis Johnson, for joining us on the show. We really appreciate you taking the time to share your wisdom and your insight and challenge us. Thank you so much for your work in this area, and we really are glad to have somebody like you in the coffee industry. We're very fortunate. Thank you so much again. Now, if you want to find out more information about BD Imports, you can go to bdimports.com. You can also stay tuned to that website for news as Phyllis is writing this book, which is definitely something that you are going to want to read. I'm going to try to post about that when it does happen. You can follow on Instagram, Keys to the Shop on Instagram. Will be updated when that does come out. But also, if you want the transcript for this episode, I would encourage you to go to keystotheshop.com and sign up for the email newsletter. That is a form that you can fill out at the bottom of the page. Just scroll to the bottom, put your information in, and you'll be on the email list to receive transcripts, some bonus audio, extra resources, news, things like that on a weekly basis. So again, keystotheshop.com, scroll to the bottom and put your info in. It's as easy as that. Another thing that I want to draw your attention to is that the Coffee Fest PNW show is quickly approaching, November 15th and 16th, and I will be there teaching on leadership, and also I will be judging latte art. I hope to be able to see you there. I hope that you're there also because I know that Coffee Fest brings so much value, not just in the great classes and trainings and accessible seminars and things like that, but it's also the networking opportunity that you have as a business owner to be encouraged and to get business done. Coffee Fest is rivaled by nobody. So go to coffeefest.com, click on the Coffee Fest PNW show and explore what is on offer, and I hope to be able to see you there. You can also follow Coffee Fest on Instagram. Their handle is Coffee Fest Show. Now, if you want to reach out to me, you can do so by emailing chris@keystotheshop.com with your questions, comments, and feedback. I would also like to hear from you if you are interested in working with Keys to the Shop consulting and training. I help businesses, coffee shops, develop their operations, develop their people, and develop their businesses. And whether you're just starting out or you're thinking about scaling, need some troubleshooting, Keys to the Shop Consulting can help you. Let's set up a phone call to talk about what that looks like. Chris@keystotheshop.com. Well, that's it for today's show. Thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate all of you listening to the show. I hope that this was a powerful and insightful one for you today. And as always, I hope that this episode has truly given you keys to the shop.